Hi, and thanks for joining the Farmer's Wife webinar today. We're going to be covering a basic introduction to Farmer's Wife, primarily focused on scheduling, project management, some basic reporting, and some common workflows that go along with that. Just as a note, we do offer some advanced features that if you're interested in, I'd encourage you to get in touch with us directly after the webinar or tune in for one of our future webinars. So, a bit about myself. My name is Michael. I'm a solutions engineer at Farmer's Wife, and I joined about 3 years ago. So, in addition to doing webinars, product demos, product onboarding, some project management, that sort of stuff, I'm also one of the main technical people for the company, primarily in North America. And I handle integrations, technical support for our clients, cloud infrastructure, networking, interfacing with corporate IT departments, that sort of stuff as well. I'm based out of upstate New York, and if you have any questions after the webinar that you'd like to send to me directly, I can be reached at michael@farmerswife.com. So Farmer's Wife is about 20 years old, and it originally was started with scheduling at its core, targeted towards the media industry. And you'll hear us say that a few times, and it really comes into play with having scheduling as the original feature led to certain decisions being made as other features were added in. And since we started off in the media industry, from the beginning, we took into account complex rate cards, buy and sell, different activities, freelancer management, equipment management, all that kind of stuff that is crucial when you're planning a project or scheduling within the media industry. And as a result, our original clients were kind of post-production agencies. And 20 years later, we have everything from small, several people operations to large corporations to public government offerings to broadcasters to educational institutes. And Farmer's Wife is being used to manage digital media departments for internal work to training materials to commercial and spots to edit sessions to color, sound, etc., etc., etc. And we currently have just over 25,000 active users. We're based on the island of Majorca, which is an island to the east of the main peninsula in the Mediterranean. And with that, we have clients located all the way from Australia and New Zealand through most of Europe and into North America, including Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And for that, you can see here the highlighted countries are all the countries that have active Farmers Web clients, as well as where we're based. So about half the company is based out of Majorca, and then we have staff working remotely from around Europe and the United States. So as I mentioned, I'm in New York. One of my colleagues on the left-hand side of the US map there is in the LA area. We have a couple staff in London and some in Sweden. And in addition to seeing a lot of different industries and how they function in different places, it also gives us great coverage on the support side of things since we span from Central European time zone to US Pacific time just from our natural normal working hours. Our founder is a gentleman named Mads, who originally was a flame artist, and in the late 90s, he felt like there wasn't a great scheduling solution, and it was a tedious task that was begging for a better way. And that led him to start Farmer's Wife. He's still actively involved. He still works and develops. And so if you see a new feature, there's a good chance that Mads either built it or he had a hand in building it. And if you come see us at a trade show or in person in Majorca, there's a good chance you'll get a chance to run into him. When Mads first started the company, it was started out of a farmhouse in the Majorca countryside. And the analogy we always make is a farmer is out in the field, and while he's growing and planning and producing things, the farmer's wife is in the house and they're doing logistics, getting the crops to market, buying seeds for the next season, making sure that the farmer gets paid for the work in the field. And we think that's a great analogy for our industry where you're the creative and you're making things, producing and making the deliverables that you send. Farmer's Wife is about managing the resources necessary to get that done. So it's making sure those resources are in place when they're needed and making sure that they're tracked in a way where you can get paid correctly for the work that you do. The way we do that is there's several different modules within farmerswife. The ones around the FW logo circle, these are the core modules that are part of every single farmerswife system, which includes scheduling, project management, reporting, invoicing, that sort of stuff. And then on the right-hand side, extra options, things like budgeting, equipment management, divisions, personnel, etc. And really what this allows you to do is, based off your business, you can add on what you need for farmerswife, as opposed to having everything all under hood at the beginning. Alrighty, so with that, we're going to hop right into the demo. Just as a couple quick notes as I get started. This is our normal process if you were going to set up a session with us. The main difference is normally on a live call while we're demoing, there'd be a lot of feedback of how would you use this? What does your workflow look like? What does your facility have in it? What type of staff are you working with? Are you delivering to clients on a paid per project basis, or is it all in-house? And that sort of stuff, which we won't have today. This is also a basic demo, so I'm going to cover scheduling, project management, some reporting, and basic financials. But there are more to the sections I'll be covering than you'll see today, as well as the additional modules and some advanced workflows you won't see today at all. If you see something and you're curious if we support it, feel free to ask at the end, or get in touch directly with me or with anyone at farmerswife, and we're happy to go through your unique work case. So with that, I'm going to bring up the farmerswife server application. You don't need to think about this a ton today. Just for the back of your mind, farmerswife runs as a client server application, and the server is where your actual data lives. And one of the nice things about the way we're set up is when you buy farmerswife, you have the option to host it yourself on your computer, on your network behind your firewall, or you have the option for us to host it where we take care of all the IT lifting. It really just depends on what works best for you. The key point with that is even when we're hosting, your data is still siloed, and there is not a giant farmerswife database with everyone's data mixed together. It's all individual. With that, farmerswife can be accessed on the client side a variety of ways. There's the desktop client, the web client, and the iOS client. And we also have two types of users, a web user and an advanced user. Advanced user is very simple. They can access the desktop client and all of the functionality of farmerswife, as well as web/iOS. Web users, as you might suspect, are web and iOS only. And the way we differentiate mainly is advanced users are your coordinators, your directors, your producers, the people managing and running the projects and the task and doing reporting and financials. A web user is really focused on what am I working on? What is my focus? So we'll go ahead and log in. So the first thing you'll see is kind of a busy screen. And there's this box floating here, which we call the toolbox. And the toolbox is just quick access to a lot of data. There's a calendar that I can use to navigate. Just hitting a couple, I have quick access to my projects, my contacts, the object manager, as well as some templates and settings. I can just hide that out of the way for now. Up top, if you remember from the What We Do slide just a few minutes ago, these are all the different modules within farmerswife. So I have hourline long form, contacts, projects, invoicing, object, dispatch, and media library. Under our settings, we can hide the ones we're not using. So if you don't need something, you don't have to see it. Or with permissions, staff members who aren't in invoicing or aren't doing reporting, they wouldn't even have to see the invoice creator, for instance. So we're going to start on the hour line. And the hour line is really based off what is happening on a day-to-day basis. So up top, you'll see today's date. If I bring back up my toolbox and go back to the calendar, I can jump around just by grabbing random days. I can also select an entire week. I can do a couple random days at a time, and they don't need to be consecutive. So for instance, if I want to look at all the Thursdays this month, or Thursday, Fridays, or something like that, I do have that option. So we'll go back to day for now. On the left-hand side, these are all my objects. And an object is anything you want to schedule in farmerswife. So that can be staff, that can be rooms, that can be equipment. The whole point of farmerswife is it's customizable to your workflow. So whatever your item is, that's what you want to schedule with. And I can set up different views, so if I don't want to look at everything, I don't have to. So in this case, this is just an edit view. I have my suites, and then I have a couple of staff editors and freelancers. But if I needed to see everything, I could. Or maybe I need production, and we'll swap back to rooms and operators where we were. And these are just different views based off your work or what you're working on. And by having this set up with this, it allows you to zoom in and out on what you actually want to work on today. So we'll stay on a slightly less busy view, and I can use my left right arrow to move around if I don't want to use my toolbox just for short periods of time. You'll see these boxes here. Each one of these represents a booking, and that's an individual event happening. So in this case, I see a couple bookings for projects. In this case, there's I Love Music, and then there's this Alex Brewer. I can see one of my staff editors is on a day in lieu today. And then at the bottom, you'll notice these are lined up with the Avid as well as the effects. And then at the bottom, we have a staff member and an editor. And when I highlight, you might notice this little orange box appears. And that's because these are the same event. This is just the Avid, and this is the staff member in it. To move, I can just do a simple drag drop and adjust the timing. So we'll bump this a little later in the day. Trash can would delete the booking. We're not going to do that right now, but we could. If I say don't want to use Avid 2 because Steven hates it, I can just do a drag drop. And I'll get the option, do I want to add or replace? And we'll do a replace. I'm going to get a couple pop-ups. Basically, Farmer's Wife can track rates on all kinds of things. So what the thing is, what's happening in the room, who the client is, what the project is, all of these could control the rate. And so all those pop-ups are doing is just checking, do I want to keep the rates or do I want to put something else? Now, suppose I didn't think one session was going to be enough for this. If I wanted to, I can make a copy of it. On Mac, it's just a command. On Windows, it would be Control. And I can just drag it into the next day and just use the same. But maybe Steven doesn't work on Friday. So in addition to the way I did the drag and drop of the Avid, I can also do things like this where I drag it up to the top and just use a double swap to swipe it from being on Steven to being on Maria. So it's in the same edit bay on both days, but one day is Steven and the next day is Maria. If I double click on a booking, I can go into the actual info on it. In this case, it's been set up as an edit up top. You can see the name, and then I have a couple note fields, and then I have this little custom field that says client attended, an emphasis on custom. I can set up different fields to appear for different booking names. This is just warning me I might lose data if I change. And so in this case, when I swap to a shoot, doesn't make a ton of sense for an Avid, but just a demo, I get a location and directions field. And if I go back to edit, then I have my client attended, and you can set these up to match whatever type of bookings you have. Maybe you don't want to need custom fields, you're going to put everything in a note field or it would live elsewhere. Or maybe you have lots and lots of booking types. The whole point is it's customizable. Down at the bottom, I have a short history, when things were added, changed, deleted. The middle section here, I have what objects are on. This is another place that I could be using to add things. And for equipment, this is really nice because I might care what's happening in a room and I might care what's happening with a person day to day, but I don't want to look at a full list of my cameras, for instance. So if I am using our equipment management dispatch module, then I'm able to find equipment and I can add it in right from this screen, including seeing what the status is on it. And then on the right-hand side here, this is an extra that appears based off this booking type called ad hoc extras. And that lets me add on cost and things as one-off fees that aren't necessarily time related to the booking. So if I wanted to make a new booking, and we'll start up here on this Avid, and we'll start at 8 a.m. and we'll have it run till 12. And I get a pop-up that lets me pick the project from my most recent, a list of recents, or all projects. And I can also see this sorted by what client the projects are for, just to help find the projects. Down below, you'll see a couple other options, most notably task. Traditionally, this would be work that's not billable, it's not tied to a client. It's customizable. Some of our clients use this heavily for admin work and things. Others use it as just a one catch-all, and some don't use it much at all. But you can customize these to match your own workflow. And then since this is a piece of equipment, it's not a person, I have the ability to put this in a maintenance mode, which just makes it unavailable, but it's not associated with anything. Just a quick note on that, I could do the same thing on a person. The only difference would be I get personnel management instead of maintenance mode for people. And then I can set them sick, vacation, day in lieu, etc., like our friend Anne, who's already on a day in lieu today. So back to our Avid, and we'll actually book it this time. And I'll go to project, and I'll do a new project. So this reveals the project window. Don't worry about everything happening on that gray block on the right-hand side that's blank. And then if you look above this center circus logo, these top fields are always here. And so with these, I can set my name, a project number, what client is for, and then my normal note fields. So as note on the number, it'll auto increment by 1, but you can set these numbers to be whatever you want. So if you have another ERP, bidding system, some piece of software where it makes sense for these numbers to match across multiple systems, you can easily set those numbers to be the same. I also see people do, since it's auto increments, I can do things based off the year. So you'll have something like 2020-01, for January, and then 001. And then it'll auto increment 002, 003, etc. And then you bump the month number. And then your project number, the first part, encodes what project number of the month or something it was. Down below, we have our Circus button. And Circus is another product that farmerswife offers for task management in and of itself. If you like what you see today, or you think, I really am just looking for task management alone, I encourage you to check out Circus. It's pretty cool, and it's available across Mac, Windows, Android app, iOS app, etc. And that just controls whether or not those two systems are syncing. Down below, similar to my booking window, these are all custom fields. So I can set these up, drop down, selectors, date, etc. I can make them mandatory if I want. And I can also set up templates. So I have different sets of fields appear based off what type of project that I'm doing. And so I'm just going to leave this on the short one. I'll go ahead and just set some random dates, and I'll make myself the producer on here and just go ahead and hit OK. Once I save my new project, it'll then drop right into this next window to choose an object class and activity. And if you have any programming experience, this will sound very familiar. An object class is just an abstract version of an object. So a good example is on my editors. Editor would be the object class, and then the editor would be the object itself. And this is really handy because when we're dealing with rates on buy and sell, I'm able to set a buy rate off the fact that maybe I'm using Fernando, the freelancer, who charges me $125 an hour. But I don't bill clients based off whether it's Fernando or Peter or whoever working the room. I bill clients based off there's an editor in the room. And so I can base that off the class. For planning purposes as well, especially with equipment and rooms, you can say, I have 4 Avids. I don't care which Avid I use necessarily. I just need one of them to be available. And it lets us set these. And then activity, once again, customizable. This is what's happening in the room. And so I'm going to swap us to editing hour just because that'll bring in our hour rate. And I know we're only booking a few hours, not the entire day. So now I have this test project up here. And then if I look down and see who's not busy under my staff editors, I can see Peter's free. So I'll just drop Peter right in. And then I get the same set of pop-ups, but instead of being online, offline, and the others, in this case, I get his various options. So now I have a booking here. If I double click on, I can see the window for the project, and I can hop from my booking window right into my project. And this gray box on the side I said not to worry about, you'll now notice there's a single event listed here. And so I'm gonna just hit OK here. And we're just gonna make a copy of this event. And we're gonna drag it over to the next day. And you might notice that Peter is busy tomorrow morning. And so you'll see I get this pop-up for this conflict. And I'm going to hit continue, which then gives me a window for when the conflict is. And in farmerswife, with permissions, you can do a couple different things. You can say, I don't care about conflicts, let them happen. You can say never allow them, and the system will just stop it automatically. Or you can do this where I can allow it, or I can go in and inspect it. But basically it'll let me book it with the option to make edits, just so I'm aware. And we'll go ahead and book it with the conflict. And I'll go, oh, looks like Steven, Ann, and Dennis are free. Ann's my best editor. So I'll just grab this and pop it up to Ann so that now I no longer have that conflict. And if I come back into my project screen, you'll now see I have 2 bookings. They're both on Avid 1, but one of them has Ann and one of them has Peter. And then finally, up top of my project here, I can add various expenses, fees, etc. on. So for instance, I can add on let's add a couple 1 terabyte drives onto this, and then those show at the bottom as material. In addition, I won't add them to our project, but we can add expenses, one-off type fees. We can apply discounts. There's a lot more you can do here with your rates. I could apply a rate card to this project saying it gets a special set of rates than these defaults that pulled in here. I could also say based off who this client is. That's all something you could get into as well. Just kind of back of your mind, if you think, oh, it's nice to track this buy and sell rate, but those rates are variable in different situations, farmerswife can probably handle it as well. So we'll go ahead and save our project. Now, something you might be noticing is we have these little red circles here, which mean not time reported. And in farmerswife, time reporting is just a way to actualize. So when work is done, after it's done, you have the option to go in and say, this is the actual amount of time we spent in it. So we'll start off in our iOS app. And we're going to take a look at the iOS app briefly, and then we'll take a brief look at the web client. They have similar functionality. Once again, you could be a web user only. Desktop users also have access, but there is not the full desktop functionality within the app. And it's really geared towards what am I working on today. So when I log in, I'm on today automatically, and you'll see my edit test project is here. Down at the bottom, I could do some navigating around so you can kind of see things Peter had going on earlier this week. Down at the bottom, just to hit a few fun things, I can do things like look at projects. So if I'm on this edit project we made, I can see my custom fields and that sort of information. I can see all the events that are on the project, so I can tell I have my event, but also that Anne's working on it tomorrow. And if I change projects to a more robust one in our demo database, you'll start to see there's a lot more going on here. Finally, at the bottom, you see this time report with the little 4. This is where the outstanding time reports. Basically, when you hit the day of an event, things from the past become time reportable. So 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 21 days ago, Peter's not been time reporting. And then I have my one for today. To time report, I can just click right into it. I can see everything that's involved. So if I want, I could do time reporting on an individual basis, or I can do it for everyone involved. Down at the bottom, I have the ability to add breaks. I can add in extras, similar to how I added those terabytes for the deliverable onto my project. I could do the same thing on a time report so that the booking, maybe there was a staff meal or something like that. And then I have notes. Maybe I went over, maybe I was way under. Maybe the only place to eat was way more expensive than normally would be expensed for a staff meal. I have the chance to do that sort of handoff information right from it. I'm just going to adjust our timeout here on the bottom just to have a little bit of difference later when we look at reporting. And then I'll just go ahead and hit done. And then you'll see there's one less time report here. Then we're going to hop over to the web client. And similar functionality, slightly different. Once you log in. And that's just a security warning since I was logged in on another device, letting me know your user is already logged in. So when you log in by default, I'm looking at my events. I can look at a single day, I can look at week, or I can look at a month. Based off permissions, you can do things like allow people to book. I can't create a new project the way I did from the desktop client, but I could do a booking. I could do a personnel, and I also can do requests. So if you wanted your task to do some personnel management or something like that, that is an option. And so we're just going to book, and we're going to make him a producer. And then within the booking, I have the normal fields where I can name it to make different custom fields appear. I can set statuses, checkpoints, and I can choose my project. So I'm actually going to pick a different project than our edit project just because I want to keep that clean, but just to see. And then maybe I know I'm going to have to add in other people. I can even do that from this screen. If I double click into an existing one, this is the one we just did. You can see the time report is done. You can see what project was for the client. On the project screen, I can go into it and get the details on the actual project and the client that was involved as well. Left-hand side, similar to on the iPhone, these are my outstanding time reports. So one of the nice things is if you do have your staff time reporting, but they're not doing it as soon as they finish something at the end of the day or the end of the week, they can quickly find all their time reports and just go through them one at a time. Additionally, you'll see there's this ad hoc time report button. And all that is I can trigger a time report without there being a booking. So maybe someone gets called into the office unexpectedly. It wasn't a planned for event. They have the option to create a time report without a booking existing first. And then to finish out the web client, just a couple things to point out. You do have access to your contacts. This was also on the iOS app. So I can find, and then depending on permissions, I can edit. So if they need to get up with a client or something like that, they can find that information. In addition to looking at my own events, I can look at my views from the hour line. So I can look at all the events, for instance, from the CG view, or if I go to the edit view that we've been on, these are all the people and their events. So for instance, this is Peter. This is that edit project that I time reported, and this is the one I just made from the web client visible. And then you can see all of them across week or month, which does get very busy very quickly when you're in a multi-view. And something that's kind of cool to check out is you can do things like look based off staff resources, but even projects, so that you can, see what's happening with your project and get a schedule that's kind of focused on the production of that. So that kind of the basics of the web client and the iOS client. So we're going to hop back over to our desktop client. So you might be able to see, but this circle has gone green. And if I hop back into my project, I would then see one of these was green and one of these was red for not time reported since it was taking place tomorrow. Bottom right-hand corner, this will let me launch into reporting. I have a couple different objects here, the project report and the financial report. So the project report window first goes and asks me, what events do I want to include? So I'm going to leave everything in place, but if I wanted to not include the terabyte drives, for instance, I could. Those are all options, and then I'll just hit OK. Key thing with this screen, like other parts of Farmer's Wife, is it's customizable, and once you're happy with a report, you can run that report on any project or set of projects, etc. So left-hand side, I have some different templates that can have different information displayed based off what the document is for. So it could be statement of works could be there, production plans, a call sheet for each day. Whatever you want to do, you can. Left-hand side, it looks really busy, but it's actually simple. Basically, we have sections, and each one of these sections corresponds to either the project, the event, or the object on the event, and every piece of data can be displayed on this report or not displayed on this report. And then once you have something you're happy with, you would print it, save it, send it to the client, whatever needs to happen. Financial reports are similar. You'll have a very similar screen, and I'm actually going to swap to my projects window to show that. And we'll bring up a couple projects. Up top, I just have a bunch of filters here that let me find, especially when you're not dealing with 10 or 12 projects like I am here, but in a real production environment where you could have hundreds over the course of the year, and after several years, easily thousands of projects. And so you want to filter by client or time or closed, active, etc. So I'm just going to grab a couple projects at once just to show, and then we'll swap to financial reports. And here I have a lot more going on just because financial reports can be different hierarchies of data. So on a project report, it's always one project, and the top container is always the project. Financial reports, I have the option to say, I want to see how much money I made per client, or I want to see how busy my staff were. So I want to see how many hours my staff worked, and then a breakdown of what clients they did work for, and then a breakdown of projects. And so I'm going to just show two different reports while we're here. This first one is just a project revenue per client. So basically, each one of these has one client, and then it lists out the various projects that were for that client, and it's just one-to-one. But if I come out of this screen and I increase the amount of projects I'm running this report on, you then start to get different useful pieces of data. Like in this case, some of the clients have multiple projects, and you can get nice totals for what happened with that client this year or for the time period those projects were for, which can be really nice. And it doesn't always have to be money. A good example is I have like a utilization report here. And the point of this is I have all my objects, and it goes, okay, on every object, what projects were they booked on? And then with that, I have lots of data. So if they're time reported, that's used time. And so I can have what time was booked, what they time reported if they did work on it, what is remaining to be invoiced and what has been invoiced already. And I can have all that data all on a report. And the key thing here is the data exists. This all flows from having the bookings. You don't have to do extra work to make these totals happen. And then we'll help you build the financial and project reports you need to produce the documents that you need for your work. And one of the fun things you'll see with Farmer's Wife is we have plenty of clients who come in and they've been using, a spreadsheet or something. And so once a quarter or once a month, they have to go through and rectify. And where did all the time go? How does it associate with the billables? And it's a miserable afternoon or 2-day period for whoever the main coordinator or someone in the office is. Once you're set up in Farmer's Wife with financial reports, you can quickly generate all of that at one time. So we've kind of focused on projects so far, and we've talked about the hour line and day-to-day scheduling, which you might be thinking, that's cool, but my business is planning to last more than one day. And that's where the long form comes into play. So down at the bottom, this is our hour line view. This should all look very familiar after the last half hour or so. And I have all my same views. I can go left, right. I can use my toolbox to navigate. All that information is there. Up top is where it gets a little more interesting. So we'll swap back to our edit view we've been on. And this is where I have several different trees. So to start with, we have the project tree. And the project tree is a Gantt chart view of production. So I have a different project loaded up here. And it's just all the different bookings that I've made based off their dates. If I want, I can come in and I can add in the project that we created along with some others. And then we'll do some adjusting to show how they are. And this starts to let you get a feel for when different projects are starting, when they're ending. By default, this will do an auto time range, which is just some trim based off the very first event and the last event. But I can also do things based off the current month, or I can do a calendar selection to pick my start and stop time. And the long form, because of that, is actually a great place to kick off reporting, because from here I can do some selections in order to make reporting and filtering really easy. And so if I want, I can then bring these out. And these are my bookings. Like you can see, this one was time reported. If I double click in, I'm in my normal booking window. So if you are a coordinator and you are thinking in a month or several week period, you can literally live in this screen. And then from here, I can go, oh, what was happening on Thursday? And I can double click and drill down to that day on the bottom. And then I can also do my normal drag, drop, move, and move things around with that. And just to show you, I'm going to add in one more project. And the reason for this is it's just a massive, massive project. And so something we're not going to really cover today, but Farmer's Wife supports something called binders, which are a way to group bookings within a project. And so this is all one big project, and then it's an episodic mini-series. And then within each episode, I have a shoot and a post-production. And then within each of those, I then have bookings. And then you start shooting before you finish post on the next episode. And so you can really start to see how this lets you get a feel for where in production something long is. And a lot of this comes down to workflow. There's a lot of shortcuts you can take in Farmer's Wife. So I can set up templates of bookings so I can add an entire episode in one movement. And then there's also maybe you don't want to set up where every episode is a binder with 2 binders underneath and it's all one big project. Maybe each episode is a project. And then I would use another way to group it for reporting when I want to get a feel for what did season 6 look like that was comprised of 10 episodes, and that means 10 projects. And that's something when you're coming on board, we really work with you on is what's the best way to track things? What's going to make the most sense day to day for you to work? With this, sometimes you don't want to think about projects alone. So we're going to swap to rooms and operator, and I'm just going to go to this month so I don't have a huge frame of time based on my projects. And so if we swap to our edit view just to narrow things down a bit, this isn't concerned necessarily with what project is taking place, but it gives you a really good feel for how busy they are. And you can still see various projects people are working on. You'll see some other shapes and colors based off people being sick or on vacation. If you're doing personnel, it might be a little hard to see, but I have my little maintenance mode barrier on this one. And you'll see these different colors that are being displayed. These are based off the client currently, but once again, customizable. So once the system is set up for you, it becomes very quick of I have colors tied to client, or I have them tied to project, or I have them tied to booking, or something like that. So you can skim a screen like this and get a really good idea for where things are. And related to this, I also have personnel management. The main difference is this also includes my personnel management, staff, sick, vacation, that sort of time. And so for instance, I know the red triangle is sick time. And so I want to focus in on my actual in-house staff and manage that sort of stuff. I have that flexibility in farmerswife as well. Finally, classes. This one's a little different than the others, and I'm actually going to swap my view on the hour line just to make it a little easier to demonstrate. And I have my Sound Studio class visible here and Sound Studio here. So you might notice that this has a little 5 here, and there's 5 members of the class. And the way this works is on days nothing is booked, there's nothing. And then you'll notice towards the end of the month, I have a 4. And the reason for that is that means there's 4 of this class available since 1 is booked. And this is really handy for planning, especially in the equipment world where you might have 20 of the exact same camera and you don't care which camera, but what you care about is you only have 20. And so if I add them all in, this goes to 0. And so if I was looking at something like all of my cameras and accessories, I'm not thinking in a what project is this tripod being used on, or where is this battery? I'm thinking in a equipment method of saying, am I going to have to rent equipment? Am I going to have to rearrange my schedule? Am I going to have to buy something new? Am I going to have to tell the guy who likes to take doubles of every piece of equipment just in case something breaks? That's not happening today. And it's really good for that type of planning as well. And then finally, one more brief reporting thing. Like I mentioned, it's a great place to kick off reporting from. You can use this as a natural filter based off the time period that's visible there. And then there's some built-in reports similar to how the project report was only a project. And financial reports can be different hierarchies. And you'll notice this little select object and tree, that's just the shortcut button, so I don't have to go find the objects. It just naturally grabs what I have there. And that's what makes it really powerful. And so like in this case, we'll just have a simple object. And this is just kind of like my utilization, but these are the bookings with their time in, their time outs, that kind of stuff. And it's just based off the hours. And so if you're dealing with freelancers or something, you could have it bring in exactly when they did work for you. And it's just a great way to kick off reporting where you can easily filter it. All right, so just 3 or 4 little things, probably about another 5 or 7 minutes to kind of wrap things up. So this is the contact section. It's relatively straightforward. You have all your contacts within farmerswife, different categories, similar to that project screen up top. I have a place where I can filter. And so if I come into here, for instance, I can see I have David. On the right-hand side, you have your company info. And what's nice here is if I have multiple people for a company, I can see on the left-hand side, all of them lined up and I can toggle between them. A couple different types. There's clients. Client is someone you can book a project to. You have resources, which are for people you want to book, so you're freelancers. Resource and client, that means they show up in both lists. And then you can have global, public for everyone, and then private. Relatively straightforward. Something else key I always like to mention, you have the ability to set up custom fields here. So you can add on the company something like a checkbox for PO required, or make a note for this person is where invoices go, or various industry specific things. And then finally, you'll see this little web client and web access. If you remember when I was in the web client, you had the option to see a project view, for instance. And one of the things you can do is you can invite freelancers and you can invite your clients to log into farmerswife, and you manage it from this contact window. And if they're a client, the natural permission set is they can only see projects that they're the client on. So they can see their own production schedule. And then freelancers, you could do permissions where they can only see the work they've been assigned to. Just a couple other random things here. I can set up rate cards and that sort of stuff. So for instance, on this one, they have a CG and offline. They have their own custom rates that would override the default ones. And so that is supported on clients as well. Object Manager, this is just where we manage all the various things that are being booked. If I'm in a user, I have a few extra options since I can manage a user account. Otherwise, I have my buy rates, my sell rates, I can met notes, I can add inventory numbers, all that sort of fun stuff you'd want to do, as well as I can set up object classes, those activities that I was booking, and then accessories, which would just be things that are booked together. And that's where I get the power where I can create groups of objects and kits and that sort of thing as well. Finally, to close out, we'll head into the invoice creator. And you'll see there's 3 sections here. Basically, you have your active projects so that you could partially invoice them if you wanted. You have closed projects, so if I needed to, I could go in and close out any remaining items. And then at the bottom, I have my invoice creator. And so I'm going to go back to the project screen. We're going to go into our test project. We're going to set it to closed. It's warning me that not everything was time reported, but that's okay. And you can tell farmerswife just to, if something's not time reported, use the book time as the number going forward. Then when I come back to my invoice creator, I now see my test projects here. If I needed to, I could review the numbers. Maybe the finance person has to double check a discount was applied, something like that. And it's easier to get people to add in time reports or something when it's closed but not invoiced. And then I can move it to the invoice creator. And the reason we have an invoice creator and an invoice manager is invoice creator, think of it as a document you're making. So this is a working project. So I have all my line items from the booking. I have some custom fields up top as well as my project info. Similar to my project report, I can kick off financial report or I can create invoices from here. And really what we're doing here is creating the document. So if I need to adjust any of these prices, I can do that. If I need to add on a fee, I can do that. And then once I'm happy that this is correct, then we would move this to the manager. And then in the invoice manager, that's where really where you would think more in the sense of I've sent an invoice, hasn't been paid. And so I can see here it's outstanding. Once again, you can have tax, discounts, all that be applied, and you can track whether it was sent. You can set your net terms, 30-day, etc. You can do credit notes, all of that sort of stuff as well. And as I mentioned before, this is a basic walkthrough, and we're coming to the end. We've taken a look, just to kind of wrap up, at how to map through, schedule, look at objects, as well as think long-term on the project tree. We've taken a quick tour of a project, including creating, closing, and invoicing a project, which we just did in our invoice manager. And then finally, we were briefly in the web client and the iOS app to take a look at the simpler view and how a user could time report on work they've done, as well as find details on it. There's a lot more that you can do with farmerswife. There's budgeting, there's integrations, there's equipment management, and there's way, way more in reporting, both on document generation as well as interesting things you can do once you have a lot of data in it. I encourage you, if you have any questions, to stick around and ask them, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Or if you don't have time, feel free to reach out directly. Just a quick reminder, kind of the way the farmerswife sales process works is you go through demos, we discuss workflow, and then once we come to an agreement to get started, farmerswife always comes with an onboarding process. I mentioned several times there's a lot of customization, both in what your objects are, what your workflow is, what custom fields you need, what type of reporting you need. And we work with you to figure all that out and then get it set up. And then once we have an idea on that, then we work on building out that database file, which if you're hosting yourself, we would then send to you, or if we're hosting, it would just be waiting for you. And then the final step would be training so that you learn how to use the farmerswife system. You learn how to edit and make your own reports. You learn how to schedule, and also that at day one, you're not just on your own. And that's why we help with the workflow and the setup of the database, so that on training day one, we're talking training in the environment we'll be using. And then finally, once you have all that done, you would go live. You'd start scheduling, tracking, invoicing, billing. Thanks again for joining. Like I said, any questions, feel free to stick around. And if something comes up down the road or we run out of time, feel free to reach out to me directly, Michael at farmerswife.com, or always support at farmerswife.com.